And with that, I think that takes care of our announcements for tonight. So now we'll welcome the feature presentation, our own club member, John Anderson. So John's a good friend of mine. We've been diving together for a while, and he was lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time down in Mexico. So figure give us some good insight into diving around Mexico and even some lesser known locations, or at least doing techniques that aren't common to the locations that you would normally go to. So with that, we'll hand the reins over to John.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. And okay, can everyone see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so we've had some presentations on Mexico, and some of what I show you will probably be familiar because we've had people present about Baja and other places. But I'm gonna kind of cover at least the places I've been to in Mexico and really hopefully try to show how much variety and amazing things there are in Mexico. And one of the things that I'm going to kind of focus on is some of the macro opportunities. I think Mexico is well known for the big animals, and I think there's a lot of people leading trips to go find and photograph the big animals. And I think a lot of people are overlooking a lot of interesting macro subjects really kind of everywhere. Mexico's known for like big dramatic walls, marlins, sea lions, sharks, like all those sorts of things. And I think those are really amazing, but there's a lot of other things that a lot fewer people are photographing. So yeah, actually for me, diving all started in Mexico, with my parents and my brother as kind of a vacation diver. I got certified in Cozumel when I was 12 years old. There you can see my original junior open water dive card from when I was 12, and a picture of my very good buoyancy and technique from when I was about 15 or 16. And kind of growing up, we would do family vacations and dive maybe every couple years or year or so, and that was kind of what diving was for me, which I think is what it is for a lot of people. And then when I moved to California for work, I learned you could dive in California and kind of got really into it. So after I was really into diving, I actually had an opportunity to move to Guadalajara, Mexico, with, at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife, Rebecca. So I actually lived in Mexico for 2 years. And so while we were living in Mexico, there was a lot of opportunities to kind of explore some different places and kind of revisit places and look for some of the macro things I'm going to show you. I think it's also worth sharing that even when I was 15 or 16, I was interested in underwater photography, though not to the way I am now. So this is actually one of the earliest photos, maybe not the first one, but one of the earliest photos I took in Cozumel on our family's little compact Canon camera in an Ike housing. I actually still have that housing, I think in our garage somewhere. Just kind of want to keep it, even though I wouldn't probably use it anymore. And that was the first housing I dove with in Monterey when I started getting into photography more seriously. Not a great photo, but I think it's kind of fun that I still have it. Okay, so there's kind of two main areas I'm going to focus on, which were the areas I dove. Primarily, I dove a few other areas, but these are probably the regions where most of the diving occurs. There is other diving and some other interesting things that I've heard about on both coasts outside of these regions, but this is where the highlights are. Okay, so the first place I'm going to talk about is La Paz in Baja, California, sir, on the Gulf of California. We've had some presentations on La Paz. It's an amazing place, and it's probably the one I dove the most when I lived in Guadalajara, because you can see on the map here, it's pretty close. And when you're in Mexico, you can actually fly directly from Guadalajara to La Paz. So it's like about an hour flight. And really pretty interesting stuff there. So I think The sea lions are one of the big attractions there for people.
Oh my God.
So
I turned to
the sea
volleyball.
lions are super friendly. They're the same as the sea lions we have in California. They're California sea lions. But I don't know if it's the warm water or
You want to grab another chair?
it's a big colony, but they're super friendly. So they'll come right up to your dome port. They bring starfish and pick them up off the bottom and try to like show you them, or they'll drop them from the surface and then swim after them and pick them up again. They come and blow bubbles in your face, or they just come and give you like these cute upside down looks while their friends off in the background. And I even actually kind of got a playful bite from one there one time, which is a surprise. Didn't pierce the skin or cause any issues, but they're just super interactive sea lions. I think they're the best in my opinion as far as photographing sea lions, because they're just right in your face and want to be photographed. Yeah, here's another one. But there's another cool thing. So this is all at Los Islotes. Los Islotes is about an hour and a half boat ride from La Paz. So it's a little bit of a journey to get out there, but it is a day trip. But if you go during the right time of year, which generally kind of the fall or early winter, there's actually like the island, this little tiny island that's full of sea lions is actually surrounded by these sardines as well. And so there's just really kind of chaos going on there. The sea lions are swimming through the sardines. These schools of snappers are hunting the sardines. Cormorants and pelicans are dive bombing you from the top into these sardines. And this is all 20-foot deep water. So you get like basically unlimited time in this blue 20-foot. It's not maybe as warm as Caribbean water, but it's like it really for wide angle and just a lot of excitement. Los Islotes is worth the hour and a half boat ride. It's just there's a lot that goes on there. Here you can see a cormorant coming down into the bait ball trying to catch one. These just chase them around trying to catch these sardines and separate the schools. I think there's maybe a sea lion in the back there too. And then there's some cool reefs too. It's not really maybe kind of the big coral formations like you'd see in Indo-Pacific or even kind of the Caribbean side of Mexico, but there are these nice smaller corals and some interesting sea stars and gorgonians and other corals, and in all that there's a lot of interesting macro subjects too, which I'll show in a second. Again, some beautiful sea stars. This is actually, so one of the primary places at Los Islotes is this arch that you swim under, and the sea lions come in there and play. And so this snorkeler, there's a lot of snorkelers who go to, you don't have to dive. Snorkeler happened, I was like taking pictures here, hoping the sea lion would swim by, and then the snorkeler happened to swim by at like a perfect time when I was lined up on this starfish. So again, depending on how you time it, you can see a lot of things in La Paz. There's also a pretty good area for snorkeling whale sharks in La Paz, and the visibility can be challenging there because of where it's at, but they often have 15-20 whale sharks in a small area. And so you can go out on a boat, and that's just maybe a 10-minute, 15-minute boat ride from town where the whale sharks are. And so you can jump in and snorkel with the whale sharks, get back on the boat and go find another one. And then another thing that's become very popular in the last couple of years, kind of all throughout southern Baja, is going to swim with these massive schools of mobula rays. And this school of mobula rays was probably several thousand. Like you can't even actually, you can see they just fade off into the distance. And it was kind of, I did this several years ago, and we actually hired a fisherman. I'd been working and diving with a university in La Paz a little bit and taking some photos from them, and met this fisherman. And so we actually hired a fisherman who said, oh yeah, you want to see the mobulas? Like, we know where to take you for the mobulas. And went and saw this massive school of mobulas. And so this is all snorkeling and free diving. But it's really pretty amazing to see this many, and each of these mobulas is probably 3 feet across. So to see this many animals of that size together is a pretty amazing thing. A lot of this has seasonality to it. Like you can't go get all of these things in one trip, but if like I would say kind of late fall, you can get many of them. Or sorry, early fall, like September, October, you can get many of them in one trip. So okay, macro. So I just showed you why most people shoot wide angle in La Paz, and those are kind of the more known subjects. That's why most people go there for the sea lions, the bait balls, the whale sharks, the globular rays. They actually do have giant manta rays there as well near La Paz. I personally haven't seen them, but if you go during the right time of year, there's a dive site where they frequently do see them. So yeah, there's great blennies. This is a saber-tooth blenny that I found diving with the university in a spot that no one really dives on the opposite side of La Paz. So La Paz is a peninsula, and most people dive out toward the tip of the peninsula or kind of more in the bay. This is actually on the other side on a point off of Isla Cerralvo, I think is what it's called. And there's this beautiful hard coral garden, and this little bunny was living inside a piece of hard coral. Another different species of bunny that has these beautiful blue polka dots. These are pretty common, but I believe endemic to the Sea of Cortez. This one, they're the brown cheek bunnies. And you start looking in the hard coral and you start finding them everywhere once you kind of know to look for them. But they're pretty neat. They have these like this brown patch on their cheek, and kind of like our fringe heads in California, a lot of frills going on. So this is one I actually spent a lot of time looking for, and you'll see in the next picture. So there's the Gulf signal bunny, which to me is maybe one of the coolest fish in the world. You'll see why in a minute. And I think it took me 2 or 3 trips to find them. And then I actually found this one diving in a super weird spot with the university because they were looking for a certain type of algae that they thought was a new species. So we were like basically in coral rubble and sand that was like 10 feet deep. And I saw this little head poking out of a piece of coral. And I was like, oh, I think that's the fish I've been looking for. And so I found this, and my understanding is other places in the Sea of Cortez, they're more abundant and easier to find, and I eventually learned that. But and so this is why they're so cool. So you have to be incredibly patient, but they have this massive dorsal fin, and if there's 2 males around, or if you can use a mirror and kind of trick them. There's a couple different techniques, but if you can get them to display, they come out and flash this fin up and down on their back. And then they go back in their hole. It lasts a few seconds, but to me, it's just like one of the coolest fish. And it's just the colors are so vibrant and beautiful. I've spent a lot of time trying to photograph this fish. There's also some cool nudibranchs, a lot of them that are kind of unique to the Sea of Cortez and the Pacific side of Mexico. This one, some kind of different colors you don't see very often, like yellow and turquoise in nudibranchs with purple rhinophores. And then there's even some variations on this one where there's like a blue and yellow, which is a different species but closely related. And then there's cool crabs and shrimp too. This is a staghorn hermit crab. So it's a hermit crab with a living piece of staghorn coral on its back, or elkhorn. I forget if it's elkhorn or staghorn. But this hermit crab walks around with this piece of coral on its back, and I guess the way the researchers explained it to me is it's a symbiosis where the coral needs to be moved to be aerated, and so it provides protection for the little hermit crab, but gets aerated by the hermit crab walking around to different locations on the reef. And so those are pretty cool. Those are we did a dive specifically with the university where they wanted to go kind of check them out and monitor them, because most people don't think these are in the La Paz area. Most people think they're only in other parts of the Sea of Cortez, but the university knows where to find them. So these are pretty cool. These are you can find shrimp like this actually very similar in Indonesia and the Philippines and other places. But this was actually a project I helped the university students in La Paz with, where they had a theory that these shrimp were all the same species that they were finding on multiple sea stars, but they would just actually change color to match the host of what they were living on, or the pattern of what they were living on. And so we actually went with them and collected sea stars with shrimp on them, and they carefully removed the shrimp and swapped them to different sea stars and put them far enough apart the shrimp wouldn't go back to the other sea star, and left them for a few days. And we went back, and sure enough, they were actually able to prove through that, and then through collection and aquarium studies in their lab, that the shrimp do change color to match their host and camouflage within a few days. So there's an orange one, and then you can see here's a white one. So they come in kind of all different colors. They live on the crown of thorns. They can be in purple, but I think purple, orange, white. I forget what other colors, but it's really pretty interesting to work closely with these university students to help them kind of document this phenomenon that they believe they were seeing. And it also meant free diving, so that was cool. It's like, hey, if you come take some photos for us, you can go on our boat with us and dive for free in weird places with us. And this is another shrimp that lives on the black coral. So there's some really beautiful black coral forests in parts of the Sierra Cortez, and you'll see one later in a different region. And this little tiny shrimp lives on there, and it's kind of like some of the shrimp people are used to seeing in like Philippines and Indonesia, but no one really thinks that these things live in Mexico. They think they have to go all the way around the world to see things like this. So, okay. So that's La Paz. I dove there quite a bit. It's probably a lot of my pictures are from there, but it's a great place. And at the end, I'll kind of talk about some of the things I still want to do, and you'll see that like that southern part of Baja really there's a lot going on down there, and you could visit over and over and over again and see different things. So Cabo Pomo is the next place. I've only been once, and this is kind of the famous Cabo Pomo thing, this massive school of jacks that goes from the bottom to the surface in 60 feet of water, and probably half the size of a football field, at least when we were there. And it's really amazing. We had bad weather when we were there, so I think we only got 2 of the 4 dive days we were supposed to get. And so really, I just have some jack pictures and like one other schooling picture. I didn't see the bull sharks or some of the other things, but the jacks in itself are worth going to see, in my opinion. It's like, I've never seen a school of fish this big anywhere else. It's just kind of a different perspective of them. And then after a while, you're like, okay, what else can I do? So I tried some creative things with like slow shutter and the jacks, and kind of liked the way this one came out. Is kind of, I think I called it something like the ghost of the jacks, because the story of Cabo Pomo is that they actually fished them until they were gone. Pretty much, there were just a few left, and then they all kind of band together and said we should stop fishing. And so it's really kind of like a recovery story, and I think this kind of helps capture that past of like they were gone and now they're back. But there's tons of other fish too. There's massive snappers, massive groupers, and then like these beautiful yellow, I think snapper like fish. And I just really liked here how there's like a flow of fish that just kind of like exploded in front of me. They just were like coming toward me and then just like turned into this ball right in front of me. So yeah, not a ton from Cabo Pomo. Definitely hoping to go back and get better weather. We were there kind of late in the season, and that was some of the challenges. Okay, so sticking on the Baja side of things, another amazing place for big animals, but also other small things. I'll show at least one small animal is Revillagigedo Islands. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Most people just call it Socorro because it's so hard to say. Socorro is actually only one of the islands in the archipelago, but it's easier to say. And just for those who don't know about it, it takes about a day just to get there by boat from Cabo. So it's a long boat ride, but it's really amazing. So it's mostly known for the giant manta rays, and they are massive. Like I mean, this is a fisheye, so it's a little bit distorted, but they're 10 to 15 feet across wingspan. And you can see in some of the other photos really how big they are. And they're amazing. They just swim right up to you. They swim right over you. It's really, really worth going just to see them and not even thinking about the other things. There's some of them that are mostly black, which is pretty cool. There's different, and they all, I guess, have a unique pattern on their belly, so they can actually identify them. Like, I don't know if they could from that shot, but if you take a photo from directly below, they can tell who it is. I think this kind of gives you a sense of scale. This one was swimming straight at my buddy, and they were about the same distance from me, and it just shows you how big these animals really are. And so I really like being able to capture this moment of my friend just kind of looking up at this animal coming towards him. And they actually really like the bubbles. They say that they like massage their bellies as they swim over, so they'll just keep coming around as you're blowing bubbles. There's also pretty good shark encounters there. We saw hammerheads. They were off in the distance. I didn't really get any good photos of them. But if you were calm and quiet and not making too many bubbles, the sharks would come make closer passes. Occasionally you could get good photos. And there was, on this trip, there were some guys who were kind of annoying. They basically would always end up in your shot. So rather than just getting frustrated about it, I decided to make the most of it and just use them in my shot. So this is the one example of that. You'll see another one with some dolphins a little bit later where the same guy is just like showing up in my shot. So Roca Partida is another one of the areas that's really famous for diving, and these little white tips just like find these caves on this rock that's out in the middle of the ocean and just pile up and sleep there. I forget, I haven't counted in a while. There's like over 20 of these little sharks just sleeping in this hole together, so that's pretty cool to see. They're not huge, probably 4 or 5 feet, but it's really neat to see how they're literally laying on top of each other because there's no other spots left.
Is there any sense or idea as to why they lay on top of each other? Like, I wouldn't think it's for warmth at all, like you would think like mammals would do, but like it just seems a bit odd, like dog pile.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm guessing some shark scientists could give a little bit better answer on why they think that's the case. And they're doing this to rest, so they're going here to like basically sleep, I think. And I don't know if it's just that there isn't enough room, because Roca Partida is basically sheer walls with these little divots into it. And almost every divot you come by, there's like at least 1 or 2 of these little guys hanging out in there. And some of the bigger divots, there's like 20 or 30 of them.
I heard bull sharks were one of the most aggressive. Are they only aggressive in murky water?
I have never seen a bull shark. The Cabo Pomo has them. And there's some sites that are known to, there's a wreck there that is kind of known to be the site where they have them. I've heard the same, that bull sharks are more aggressive, but I haven't seen them or seen how they behave, so I can't really comment. These guys are just, these little white tips are just super docile. They're just sleeping in these holes. They don't even really care you're there. Occasionally one will kind of get up and swim away, but
Does university have an office in Baja?
yeah, so the university I was working with is actually based in Baja. It's UABCS, which is like Universidad Autónoma Baja California Sur. And I actually met them on this trip to Socorro because they were on the trip doing citizen science as a citizen science trip. And specifically the researcher who I got to know and dove with in La Paz researches corals and kind of more of the reef life and reef health stuff, so not the pelagics. A lot of the other citizen science trips have the pelagic researchers and shark researchers on them. but yeah, I'll show some pictures in a minute. They actually we're going to Socorro because not a lot of people have gone there to do research necessarily. And so pretty much every time someone goes, especially if they're, I think shark researchers and those people go frequently, but if you're like a coral researcher or like a small like fish researcher, pretty much every trip you discover new species just because not that much of that work has been done there because it's so remote.
Is their office in La Paz?
It's in a suburb like in La Paz. And the professor who runs the lab I did the photography with, his name is Carlos Sanchez. So the other amazing thing, which we were afraid we weren't going to get because we didn't have good luck, we heard them every day, but for the first half of the trip, we saw no dolphins. And that's the other thing Socorro's kind of known for is bottlenose dolphin encounters. And so finally, when we went back to, I'm trying to think of the island. I can't think of it right now, but the one where this is the boiler in the background. So the boiler is one of the more famous dive sites there. And it's this really kind of unique rock with these horizontal lines through it where there's really good manta encounters, dolphin encounters. I think they get tiger sharks there. We didn't see any, but and so finally when we weren't able to dive the boiler at the beginning of the trip because the conditions were not good enough. And so finally on the way back we were able to go there, and that's where we got the dolphins. And pretty much every dive we had bottlenose dolphins coming up to us there, which was really neat. Here's the same guy I was talking about again, who just loved to get in all the photos. I'm not sure what he was doing there, but really pretty cool to have these dolphins come up and kind of check you out. You can tell they're really curious about you. And the funny thing with them though is they swim up to you like this and stop swimming and they start sinking. So you actually need to be really careful because if you're trying to photograph them, you're going to start sinking too and staying with them. And next thing you know, you're super deep and you're like, oh no, what am I doing? So that was kind of an interesting thing to learn about. And then some people might recognize this one. I think I used it for a mini comp a year or so ago. We also found false killer whales one day. A pod came by the liveaboard. And so we all kind of scrambled to grab fins and cameras and snorkels and caught up with them and were able to jump with them a few times. But the tails here is kind of the best I got because they were moving pretty fast. Did not seem very curious. Okay, so now some of the other things, like I think all the big animals keep most people entertained at Socorro, and so no one ever kind of looks to the reef to see what might be in there. And because I was working with these or at least talking to the university and becoming interested in working with them a little bit, I volunteered a few dives to go look for things for them, and actually even put a macro lens on in Socorro for a few dives to go help them take photos they needed for their research. This is a wide angle one, but this is just like, I'm pretty sure there was a shark right behind me, and I just saw this octopus out cruising on the reef and thought it was really pretty neat. I'm not sure the species of octopus, but it's pretty good sized, and just the texture is really neat on its skin. Okay, so this is a bunny that I'm fairly sure is endemic to that group of islands. And this was one of the ones that I took when I put a macro lens on to go take photos with the professor, because they were looking for things like this, and they had permits and actually collected some of these, and I believe they determined they were new species that's endemic only to the Galapagos, or sorry, not the Galapagos, the Socorro area. And it was really nice, especially because there was like an orange sponge in the background. It was living in this green sponge and it was orange. So I really liked kind of how that all worked out. And then this is another endemic species to those islands. It's just a triggerfish, but it's got like every color of the rainbow. It's crazy. These things are swimming around everywhere. And everyone has fisheye lenses on or wide angle lenses, so you never really get a photo of them. So I made it a point to take time to take a nice portrait of one of these when I had the right lens on to do that. And the colors are incredible. It doesn't even look real. And this, I think, was probably probably in the top 5 experiences I've ever had underwater. So we were at the boiler toward the end of the trip, and I noticed this like ball of fish that was just kind of like a school of fish just swimming around this one area. And next thing I know, I see a manta coming across, and it's not actually in the middle of it, but it swam right behind it. And so it's kind of one of those moments where you see something happen, and you're like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if my settings are right, but you're just going to take the photo because you have to, because you're probably never get an opportunity to take it again. And so I took a little bit of processing, but it's just like one of those experiences I'll never forget, and seeing this manta swim kind of right through this almost perfect ball of fish.
That's really cool.
Okay, one more thing on that side of the country, and then we'll hop to the other side. So this is a less common trip. A lot of people know about all the diving in the south of Baja, and not that many people dive kind of in the northern part of the Sea of Cortez, but there are some boats that do trips up there that actually, there's some boats that do the whole thing. And I did a trip that left out of Puerto Penasco, which you can actually drive to from Phoenix, Arizona, and then went about halfway down to these islands called the Midriff Islands, and then went back to Puerto Penasco. And so I was really kind of on that trip because I'd heard there was really good macro there. And I really like bunnies. You may catch a theme that bunnies are kind of one of the things I like to photograph. So this is I don't remember its name. It's hard to find in books, but it's like a plume bunny. People call it like the punk rock bunny because it has this like big punk rock hairdo. I'm pretty sure I only know 2 other photographers who have photographed this bunny, and they photographed it in the exact same place I did, in Bahia Los Angeles, in the northern Gulf of Mexico, or northern Gulf of California, Sea of Cortez. And so I was super happy when I found it, because I think I had only seen one other photo of it at the time, and it turned up, and I ended up spending the whole dive just photographing this bunny, and only saw the one of them and never saw it again. This is one of the ones I knew we'd find, and so when we were on the dive sites where they were, I spent time looking for them and getting the photo. These are orange throat pike bunnies. So they have the males have this interesting territorial mating display where they have a dorsal fin they raise, and they puff up their neck and show this orange throat. They're kind of unremarkable long skinny fish when they're not doing this. Just like any pike bunny, they're just kind of like whatever. But so I spent a lot of time because I wanted like the photos of them displaying, and I was kind of alluding earlier, some of these bunnies you can kind of trick if you get like a little mirror and put it in front of them, because then they see it and they think it's another male, and so then they kind of come out and display. But it still takes a long time to get the photo, because these are very kind of fast motions that they come up and do this for a few seconds, and then you may be waiting another 10 to 15 minutes for it to happen again.
There's like a claw under its throat. Is that like a crab that's behind it or something?
You know, I hadn't seen that before, but I think they have like modified front fins, like some fish do, that are kind of like almost like little feet.
Huh.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that before. It almost does look like a crab claw, but I think they just have like some kind of tassels that hang off there. And then here's the Gulf Signal bunny again. This one has a little bit nicer dorsal fin than the one I showed from La Paz. Again, another fish I spent quite a bit of time, like once we got to the site where they were, quite a bit of time trying to photograph them and get this displaying shot, because it only happens once every every 10 or 15 minutes, where they come up and flash like 3 or 4 times and go back in the hole. There's lots of jawfish there too. This is the only one I have a photo of, because this one is the most unique. So people are used to jawfish being like, I don't know, like 6 inches long, like maybe a ½ inch to an inch around. These are like the size of like your forearm. They're like, their head is like the size of your fist, and they're like a foot long. And they're giant jawfish. And so like the thing I like to say is, you can see the eggs in the mouth there. Those are like the same size as the eggs in any jawfish's mouth. It's just the fish is way bigger. These are pretty cool. There was only one spot where we saw these two, but you come across and you just see these massive like holes in the rocks, and you wait long enough, and they're pretty shy. So you kind of have to wait and hunker down and be quiet, and then they'll come up, and if you're lucky, they may show you the eggs like this for a second. I think I actually saw one come all the way out of the hole, and that's when you realize how big they are. And I believe this also, I'm not sure if it's just Sea Cortez or it's just that Pacific part of Mexico. It might just be Sea Cortez. There's a lot of endemics in the Sea Cortez. There's a lot of scorpionfish everywhere, but this one had a skeleton shrimp dance party going on its face. And so I think one of the guides pointed this out and just thought it was pretty interesting to see these skeleton shrimp just hanging out on the scorpionfish. They may or may not even know that they're hanging out on a fish. They might think it's just a piece of algae or a rock or whatever. So I just tried to figure out a way to capture that. And with the lens I had, really all I could do to get them was just get the eye in there. There's sea slugs too. This is not actually a proper nudibranch. I forget what it's called, but it's like a different type of sea slug. Very similar to a species, maybe even the same as a species that you find in the Caribbean. Kind of cool with its frilly back. Lots of octopus in that part of the Sea Cortez. I'm not sure the species, but there are lots of them. Like almost every dive, you'd find a few octopus, and this one is pretty good size. And there's also California sea lions there, so they actually live in the Sea Cortez. I think Cabo, maybe the farthest south they live. Maybe the farthest south in their range. I'm not, but yeah, they were playful. And then I was alluding to the black coral earlier. So there's these black coral forests that are amazing. And it's green, but they call it black coral because the skeleton is black. So if you looked at under kind of all the frilly parts, that part's black. And you're on this black coral wall, and these sea lions are just dive bombing you. Like they come down from the surface like maybe 80 feet and check you out and then go back up. And so on this dive, I really once I saw that was happening, I really kind of slowed down behind the group a little bit and really wanted to kind of capture the sea lions coming down among this black coral forest. So I was mentioning this Baja Los Angeles place. Another great place to check out whale sharks if you're interested in doing that. And this is all done on a liveaboard. You can go to these places from land, but a lot of them are pretty primitive. Not a lot of facilities there. But so this is actually a whale shark company that's based there that met up with the liveaboard. We got on their boats and went and snorkeled with whale sharks. And I know everyone always wants beautiful blue visibility, crystal clear water. I actually personally think for whale sharks, I prefer kind of the emerald tone, because I think it contrasts the gray blue of the whale shark better than a perfect blue water, but that's my opinion. It's also pretty cool desert mountains around there that are pretty high. So I spent some time trying to get these over-unders with the whale sharks and the boat. That was actually the boat I jumped off of. So I got around between the whale shark and the boat at one point. Or sorry, behind the whale shark. You can kind of see the mountains rising up there. Really pretty cool place. And we only got to spend one day there. Between the macro and the whale sharks, I think that's a place I would certainly like to spend some more time. Okay. That's a lot of Baja. So we're gonna jump across the country now to the Caribbean stuff, which I think in general more people are more familiar with. And we're gonna go back to Cozumel, which is actually where I started diving quite a while ago. But these are recent pictures, not the old ones anymore. So I think this is what most people think of when they think of Cozumel. They think of like great turtle encounters on these big walls, dramatic reefs, which is amazing. It's really beautiful. It's easy diving. You jump in and drift a couple miles, and the boat picks you up down the way. Photography can be hard because of the currents. Like you basically get a shot as you're floating by, and if you miss it, you have to wait for the next one because you're not going to be able to stay here with this turtle very long. Same with like these eagle rays, and there's a lot of eagle rays there. And I think if you go during the right times of year, you can see like big groups of them together, like 10, 12 of them. I've seen some photos recently of that. Again, more turtles. It's always fun to watch them feeding because there's always wrasse and other fish around just kind of picking up their scraps. And so it's always fun to watch them, watch that. Again, beautiful blue water, reefs, turtles. That's kind of what most people think of Cozumel. There's also great macro. It's kind of hard in spots down on the reef, but up on the tops of the reefs where the reefs are flat and not these steep walls, you can actually kind of get out of the current in some place. And there's also then past the reefs, if you keep going toward shore, there's actually seagrass beds. So the next group of pictures are from the tops of the reefs and seagrass beds where you actually can shoot macro if you want to. And this looks kind of like the punk rock bunny, but it's a totally different species because they're in a different ocean across the country. And but again, cool bunnies. I think this is kind of a Caribbean one more people are familiar with. You see from all over Caribbean. I kind of like this. There was another backscatter, but he was coming out of his hole to feed on something. I don't think he was actually trying to feed on that, but I just kind of liked how that piece of backscatter made it look like he was trying to feed on it, so I left that in. Little juvenile filefish. This is endemic to Cozumel, splendid frogfish. They're actually pretty common, pretty easy to find. You see them maybe not every dive, but at least when I've been, probably at least one a day or one every other day. They're just usually tucked down under rocks. This is kind of similar to the sea slug I was showing you from Baja. That's not actually a nudibranch. So in the Caribbean, there are nudibranchs, but the only ones I've seen are super tiny. Up in the seagrass beds, there's conch, a couple different species, which are kind of cool. I mean, not a lot of people maybe photograph them, but when you see their eye stalks and mouths and stuff coming out of the shells, they're kind of cool. You can do different things with those. They don't move very fast, so they're easy to snoot. And believe it or not, there is Sean the sheep in Cozumel. If you find the right algae and your guides know where to look, there is a species of Sean the sheep, not the same as the one in Indonesia. But again, this is like kind of one of those macro subjects where people think you have to go to Indonesia or the Philippines to find it. And believe it or not, they're actually in the Caribbean. There's also these bumblebee shrimp that live on, I think it was a sea cucumber. So if you have a good guide who like knows where to find this stuff, and this is all up in the seagrass beds. So most people have never dove in the seagrass beds in Cozumel because everyone stays on the reefs. And so if you go up in the seagrass beds and find these cucumbers, you can find these bumblebee shrimp on them. Okay, and then the last thing for Cozumel I'm going to cover is actually when we went, I think at the end of 2019, people had maybe done some exploratory blackwater dives, but no one had really done a kind of an official blackwater dive there. So I actually took equipment and worked with one of the shops to do some of the first blackwater dives that had ever happened in Cozumel. It kind of has all the right ingredients for blackwater diving. They have deep water close to shore. They have a lot of current, meaning things are moving through frequently. And so the theory was kind of like there has to be good things here if we can just find them. So we went out to like 1,000 feet of water with the downline I brought and threw it in, not really knowing what to find. And I think we did 3 nights. And this next sequence of images is kind of what we found. And there's actually now a company that does it there several times a week. And they're finding all the crazy stuff you see in Florida and the Philippines and anywhere else that's known for blackwater diving. So the squid, this is a box jelly. I forget, this is I forget what it's called, but just a really cool, like you can see like the illumination in the combs. It's a comb jelly of some sort. This is a banded coral shrimp that hasn't settled yet. So it's a, like you can see it's starting to get the red bands, the red and white ones that most people probably know. But this is just floating around over 1,000 feet of water. Little larval flounder. Another squid. And that's just some of the things. I mean, they're really, so we realized, okay, there was good blackwater stuff there. And like I said, people are doing it now and finding all sorts of amazing stuff, just like other places in the world. Okay. I believe the last place I'm going to talk about is just across from Cozumel on the mainland in Playa del Carmen. And so I think Cozumel is probably more famous than the reefs on the mainland, but there are nice reefs there too. And this is a picture of a bunch of fish hanging out together on a reef, just off of Playa del Carmen. And there's lionfish. I know a lot of people are like, why are you taking pictures of lionfish in the Caribbean? But there's a lot of them, and they are pretty, even though they're invasive. And a lot of places in Cozumel and Playa del Carmen and stuff, they actually hunt them and eat them, and they taste pretty good, and they're trying to get rid of them and fix the problem. But I don't know, there's a lot of them. So there's nice big brain corals there. Just so really, it's on that side, it's at least where we dove, it's pretty similar to Cozumel, just not the big dramatic walls. But as far as species and stuff, pretty similar. And in some ways it's easier because it doesn't have the strong currents, so you don't really have to fight that if you want to. I mean, both are really nice, but you don't have the big walls or strong currents. But really the reason we went to this area is not to dive in the ocean, it was to dive in the cenotes. And so this was one we actually snorkeled in, and that's my wife Rebecca, who I got to free dive down next to the mangroves. So this might just look like mangroves, but actually not in the picture, but near here there's an entrance, or maybe at the very bottom under the mangroves, you can actually enter a cenote through this kind of like lagoon. Again, Rebecca modeling for me at I think one of the most beautiful cenotes. And so I think the key with like a lot of the places, but especially the cenotes, is hire a good guide and tell them what you want to do and see. Because like you can go to this cenote at a different time of day and it won't look like this at all. Because the sun has to be in the right spot, and it's only in the right spot for a few hours a day. And so like if you want to take photos like this, hire a guide who knows the cenotes, tell them what cenote you want to go to. And like maybe even show them like, I want a photo like this, because I know a lot of people who've like gone to the right cenote but at the wrong time of day, and you just don't get the light if you're not there at the right time of day. This is another one that's really cool where it's at the edge of the forest, and so there's just all this fallen tree branches in it. This is kind of one of the more classic like stalactite. This is in, I think, actually the pit. So the pit is very famous because it gets a very strong beam of light and it's very deep. And this is off on the side, kind of toward one of the caverns where you get these I don't remember if it's stalactites or stalagmites. You get both, but there's no bottom below us here for at least 100 feet. This is at Dos Ojos, which is kind of one of the first ones most dive companies would take you to. But I think it's really one of the really neat ones still. And so here you can see my guide in the background swimming around behind this formation for me, and here he's pointing out a fossilized conch shell. It's actually in the rock in the cenote. Again, another one where he knew there was amazing beams of light, so he said we should go here at this time of day, and then he was nice enough to model for me in the beams of light. So yeah, I guess that's it for photos. I just have a few more comments, then I'm happy to take questions. So I've been a lot of places in Mexico and I feel really lucky for that, but there's a lot more places I haven't been, and you've probably seen some of them either through pictures or presentations, or maybe you've been to them. Guadalupe was on my list, but that's no more. I don't know if you guys are following that. They have suspended all tourism and scientific activities at Guadalupe for the white sharks. Unclear if it'll ever come back. So missed out on that one, unfortunately. Magdalena Bay has been a big hotspot in the last couple of years, and that's pretty close to La Paz. If you've seen any of the striped marlin bait ball photos, those are probably from there, most likely. But where there's bait balls, there's all sorts of other things. So those trips, which are all free diving, snorkeling, you typically see sharks and different whale species. Quite a few groups have seen orcas. But the other thing people don't realize is there's also a gray whale season at Magdalena Bay. San Ignacio Lagoon is kind of the most famous place to go pet and see the gray whales. And you can like take split shots from the boat. You can't get in the water with them, but you can hold a camera down and photograph them as long as your body is not in the water. But they have them in Magdalena Bay too. Then near Cabo, there's quite a bit of good shark and orca encounters. There's a lot of good photos of makos and blue sharks and smooth hammerheads and orcas coming out of Cabo. They also get the mobula rays, like I showed in the big schools. Loreto supposedly is the best spot for those Gulf Signal bunnies that I showed you. Supposedly there's a dive site there where they're just covered in them. I haven't been, but it's on my list because based on how hard it was to find and get those to display, if such a dive site exists, I would like to go. There's also, I heard other good macro. I think there's sea lions, and there's a lot of blue whales there. You can't jump in with them, but you can still go see them from the boat. I mentioned San Ignacio, and then in the Caribbean, I think in February is when they get sailfish. So like the striped marlins in Baja, they get sailfish feeding on bait balls near Isla Mujeres, and that looks pretty amazing as well. And then there's the whale sharks. I think in the summer, if you prefer blue water, unlike me, instead of green water with your whale sharks, then I've heard off at Isla Mujeres is pretty good. Although I think it's kind of become because it's so close to Cancun, it's kind of become a big tourism sort of attraction for snorkelers, and there can be days when it's very busy on the water with a lot of boats. And then the last one is this place kind of south of Cancun and Tulum, where you can go with saltwater crocodiles. I think is the only place kind of other than Cuba where you can photograph the crocodiles. Yeah, so that, I believe that is it. If anyone, there's website and Instagram. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Awesome. Thank you, John.
Can you snorkel off Isla Mujeres from the beach, or do you need to take a boat to get to a decent spot?
I haven't been to Isla Mujeres I know you have to take a boat to find the sailfish and I think it's pretty far offshore.
I've
And
been
I
to
think
do
the
it.
whale sharks.
You definitely need to get on a boat. You're going to get on a boat. You're going to search for a while before you find them.
I'm in a Zoom meeting. It's almost over.
Okay, well, as soon as you're done, either work out or what you already know. So thank you.
As you were trying to find your guide, particularly for the cenotes, how did you go about finding a good guide? Did you have leads through shops or people you were working with, or just do really good Google searching?
So I think if I remember right, I asked someone at Backscatter, and they connected me to, I think, Joel and Jen Penner, who connected me to a shop called Dive Adventuras that I believe no longer exists. But I mean, I think what I would do if I was going back, either try to find the same guide whose name was It's actually funny. Like I had no clue this was going to be the case, but the guide who I ended up diving with in the cenotes, like he told me his name, and then I was looking, and if you look at who the guide who modeled in Alex Mustard's photos is, it's actually the guide I dove with. So he knew exactly where to go for all those types of shots because he had done it many times. And I had no clue that was going to be the case, that the guy happened to work there, and they're like, "Oh, photographer's coming, we're gonna give you this guy." I'm sure he's still in the area, even if the shop doesn't exist. So if you looked up his name, you could probably find him. But there's a lot of people, like I would say anyone who's taking like cool cenote photos, just maybe reach out to them. And if they're not working down there themselves, they can probably put you in touch with a guide who knows how to do it.
Has anyone dove in Costa Rica?
I dove in Costa Rica growing up with my family once on the Pacific side. I don't remember it that well. I think it's similar to Pacific Mexico from what I remember. I remember seahorses.
I was wondering if the
Yeah,
Caribbean side is better.
yeah, I'm not sure.